So, Marcella, as you reflect back on your lesson that you did yesterday with Matthew, how do you think that it went?
I feel that it actually went better than I thought it was going to.
Okay.
Because I was kind of unsure with starting a new novel with him as to how he was going to react to it, because at the beginning of the class he kind of said, he didn't really have many interests, so I didn't know where to go with picking books, so I picked a book on the Holocaust,
okay.
and wasn't sure if he'd have background knowledge or how he'd react to it, but he actually seemed to really enjoy the fact that we were going to be reading about this, because then he remembered. At first he said he couldn't remember what the Holocaust was. He didn't have any knowledge of it. But then he was like, oh, we read Number of the Stars. So once he made that connection that he had already read a book about the Holocaust, he was a lot more open to answering questions, and because he knew something about it.
Right. Good. And that's what that was one of your goals this whole time with him, was making those connections. So that's good. What did you see Matthew doing or hear Matthew doing that made you feel that it went well?
Just even in his tone of voice when he was answering the questions, because he knew what certain vocabulary meant. I mean, I introduced vocabulary with him, and even though at first he's like, yeah, I don't know what the Holocaust is, but then once he realized he did know what it was, then his tone of voice just changed, and his attitude, because he could contribute to it without having to even look up the definition on the computer. And just the different activities that we did, and the reading even, it seemed like he was more into the text, just because his tone of voice and his attentiveness, his confidence as to what he was doing was much higher because of his connection to already knowing something about it, but also I think it's something that maybe interests him. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to admit that it interests him sometimes, because he's a 7th grade boy.
Right.
But and, he knows that he's lower in reading, but even as he was reading a little bit, I could see him using the strategies and kind of getting into the reading more and wanting to be able to read it and get it right.
Good. It's really good. How do you recall your own behavior? I know you wanted to focus on questionings, like more in-depth critical thinking questions. So how do you feel that went?
I feel it went really well, because he actually allowed me to go further, I think, than I had originally planned, because I had some questions planned, but then as we were reading, because his interest in what we were reading was so high, I could ask him more questions and he could give me those answers more readily. I didn't kind of have to give him... In the last novel that we read, I kind of noticed he was like, well, maybe if I sit here... Kind of the attitude, if I sit here long enough because I don't really have anything to say, maybe she'll jump in and then lead me to say something. Whereas this time he was more forthcoming with answers and information because he wanted to talk about it.
Right, that's good. How did you change your plans in any way while, doing the lesson? Or did it pretty much go how you planned?
It pretty much actually went how I planned.
Okay.
I mean, kind of changed things around, just little tiny things. I mean, did a couple more vocabulary words than I had planned, only because he did know what some of them meant, so it wasn't like we had to go over certain things for a longer period of time. He already had that background knowledge. So just little things like that. And reading, I let him read a little bit more than I had originally planned, which was a good thing, because
why was that?
He was into what he was reading, so he was more confident in it. So I can see that now, even in future lessons from yesterday's lesson, that he is more confident in his reading of this novel because he wants to get it right. And I also kind of think maybe it's because he trusts me a little bit more.
Right.
Now we're 3 weeks into this, and he realizes that I'm asking these questions for a reason, not just because, I want to ask him questions about the text.
Right.
And it all has a greater purpose.
Okay. Do you think that he knows the method to your madness, the purpose behind all of what you're teaching him?
I don't think he knows the actual full long-term goal. He knows it's to make him a better reader, and we've gone over to use his word strategies And even in today's lesson, it was, you know, like, we really have to pay attention to the words in the context and everything. But he is getting better. I have noticed him getting better, so he knows that he's getting... And I do give him a little bit of praise.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not so good about that. But I do let his mom know, you know, he's been doing a good job. So he hears that, and I think he knows that, okay, whatever I'm doing is right.
Right.
So he's a little more open to then answering the questions and using the strategies that I'm telling him are important and paying attention to the details that I'm trying to then, for him to reach that goal, even though he might not know exactly what the goal is.
Right, okay. Good, then you just talked about your goals. Where are you going in your future lesson with him after this? We've kind of started today a character analysis. So I was doing with him a Venn diagram to compare and contrast, which we had kind of worked on in the last novel as well. So hopefully, I hope to get some tiny bit of writing in with that. But we are going to kind of switch gears now into characters and character analysis, not too deep, but, you know, he can answer questions about the characters. He was, I thought, very good at answering deeper questions. Okay.
Not just the text-based
questions. Can you give me an example?
We were talking about the author's purpose, like why the author wrote it that way, because the first chapter in the novel starts that it's present day.
Okay.
And then the second chapter then goes to 1941. He starts telling the story, and I said, well, you know, why do you think the author did it this way? And he said, you know, I can't remember his exact words, but he said so that you could see that, you know, build the background to know that something was going to happen, because these strangers are there, and the girl telling the story, who you think is going to be the main character, is his daughter. And so you kind of look, he said, you use the clues on the cover, and you use the title, and to kind of figure out who these people are and where his story is going to go once it starts into the second chapter.
Yeah, good. That's awesome that he could do that. With character analysis, do you plan on having him relate himself or try to make connections with those characters? Is it possible? I don't really know the story.
As we're reading, trying to
not formally,
but just, you know, connect to maybe not the characters per se, because for him it's probably going to be hard to connect to what they're going through.
Right.
But connect to the actual just storyline with what he already knows of events of the Holocaust and World War II, because he already has mentioned to me certain things that, you know, I'm like, no, that's not necessarily true, that I kind of have to, like, correct his thinking. And there was a part in the book today that we read that, you know, because he said Hitler blamed all the Jews. And I said, well, yeah, that's part of it. And they did say that in the book. But also then to have him reflect on how the characters have changed. So connected to what he already knows. He kind of already knows what's going to happen to the characters, and he's making predictions already, so why that change, you know, and what were they going through that made that change, or did they change at all? Maybe they didn't change at all by the end of the novel, just kind of seeing that progression. Right.
Okay, good. I guess one other question. I think you may have kind of explained this a little bit, but what are some things that you could explain of why your Tutti is starting to be able to make that connection? I know you said maybe he's more comfortable with you and he sees, you know...
I think that it might be the comfort level, and also his comfort level with this text, the information in it, because he already read, like I said, Number of the Stars, which is also about the Holocaust, and I don't remember it exactly, but I believe they had to go into hiding, and it was a safe place, and so he knows that Jewish people had to go into hiding, so he's already familiar with that whole concept, so to him this isn't a foreign kind of concept. Dear Mr. Henshaw, while it wasn't a total foreign concept to him, some of the things that the boy, even though he was the same age, he couldn't really relate to. He could, but he couldn't because he didn't have that, not that he relates to these characters because he has that experience, but he didn't have the experiences for a boy his age of his. Like, his parents aren't divorced, and he doesn't have, you know, a hard time getting along with friends. So this one he can not relate to it, but connect with it a little bit more because he has that prior knowledge to pull from the text rather than just his own life.
Okay. Any last thoughts on changes, things you liked, not liked, about...
I'm kind of glad I picked this novel because he is so into it, and it's like a 4.5 reading level, and he's on 5, which is better for him because the most difficult words that are in there are usually the content words, like either countries or foreign names. So at least with that, then
he feels successful.
He feels successful with the normal everyday words. So
good.
He's moving along.
Good. Perfect. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you.